Hi everyone, this is Sultan Hassan and you are watching the Nightclub. We are here to stop mindless scrolling and sharpen your mind with the game of chess. This game has defined the greatest minds for centuries and now it is time for you and your fellows to gain the same advantage. Let's master this together with simple lessons to improve your focus and decision making. Welcome to the club. Let's jump in. Before we start, subscribe and hit the bell icon to join our beginner to pro series. Don't miss a single step on your journey to winning your first game. This is chessboard. A chessboard is a big square made of 64 smaller squares. To keep track of where pieces go, we use a simple grid system. The columns, these go up and down. They are labeled with letter A to H. The rows, these go side to side. They are labeled with numbers 1 to 8. Every square on the board has its own name and address. To find it, you simply look at the letter first and then the number. For example, if you are in a column E and row 4, that square is called E4. Place the board so that each player has a light colored square in their bottom right corner. Let's set up your pieces. White always start on rank 1 and 2, while black takes 7 and 8. Let's build your back row. We call these the power pieces. Start at the corners, rook on A and H. Next to them, place your knights on B and G. Then come the bishop on C and F. Now here is the golden rule. The queen always sits on her own color. The white queen goes on the light square at D1 and the black queen goes on the dark square at D8. The king takes the last remaining spot on E. Finally, drop your shield of 8 pawns. Fill the entire second rank in a straight line. Give it a quick look. If your rooks are in the corner and the kings are staring each other down across the E column, you are ready to play. With your pieces all in place, let's see how every piece moves across the board. Chess is one of the oldest and most recognized games in the world. It is an exciting game of strategy and planning, which is why it is seen as a symbol of intelligence. However, chess is easy to learn and can be enjoyed by anyone at any level. Chess is played on an 8 by 8 board with 64 squares and 32 pieces. And the game is all about checkmating the king. Once the king is in checkmate, which we will explain later, then the game is over. So to start, let's meet the king. Even though the king is the most important piece in chess, it is not the most powerful. The king can only move one square at a time in any direction. Here are the squares where the white king can currently move. Here is one more. Now the king could move here, and here is another king move. In chess, both players have identical sets of pieces. You have a king, and so does your opponent. Each player will take turns making a move until the game is over. Now that you have learned how the king moves, let's move to our next piece, the pawn. The pawns. Sounds like it is the humblest of chess pieces, but it is really one of the most powerful when working together. Pawns are the soul of the chess. Pawns have few strange rules, so make sure to pay attention. Pawns can only move straight forward and they can only move one square at a time. However, if it is their first move of the game, they can choose to move two squares forward if there is nobody blocking them, as pawn cannot jump over other pieces. Remember, the pawn can choose to advance one or two squares only on the first move. On all other moves, the pawn advances one square. Pawns are also the only piece in chess that cannot move backward. One other thing that makes them strange is that while they cannot move straight forward to capture, pawn can only capture diagonally, and they can only capture one square away diagonally even if it is their first turn. We will explain capturing in one of the next lesson. Let's see some pawn moves. In this position, since this pawn has yet to move in the game, white decide to move it two square forward. Black on the other hand only advance this pawn one square. Remember, even though you can move your pawn two square on its first move, you are not forced to do so. White now advances this pawn forward and now both pawns are blocked and cannot move. In this position, how many white pawns can move? If you said 1, you are correct. Notice that this pawn is blocked by black pawn directly in front of it. Remember, pawns cannot move backward. White now has the option to move this pawn up one square. Notice this pawn cannot move two square forward because the black pawn blocks it. A knight is perhaps the most fun piece in chess. It is the only piece in chess that does not move in some sort of straight line. It moves in strange L shape. The other interesting thing about the knight is it is the only piece in chess that can jump over other pieces, like this. It takes a little practice to understand exactly how the knight moves. It goes two square in one direction and then one square to the side, like this. Highlighted are all the possible squares the knight can move to on the next turn. It always moves in the same pattern. Two to the side and over one like this or like this. Up to and over one or down to and over one. And notice that the knight moves from a light square to a dark square. And then on the next turn, it moves from a dark square to a light square. The knight always switches color with the each turn it makes. Now that you have learned how the knight moves. Now let's move on to the next piece, the bishop. The bishop is one of the most interesting pieces in chess because it can move as far as it wants, but only on diagonals. Unlike knights that we just learned, it cannot jump over other pieces. This means that the bishop has to stay on the same colored square it starts the game on for the entire game. In chess, you got two bishops. This bishop is called the light square bishop because it can only travel on the light squares. Meet the other bishop that you have in the game, the dark squared bishop. It moves exactly like the light square bishop but only on dark square diagonal. Now that you have met both bishops, let's take a look at how they move. With just one move, the dark square bishop can enter the longest dark square diagonal on the board. Let's do the same with the light square bishop. Now notice, no matter how many bishop moves we make, the bishop never cross paths. They never block each other, and the reason why is because they are on opposite color squares, so they never interfere with each other. They make a good team. Now that you have learned how bishop move, let's move to our next piece, the rooks. The rook. After the queen, the rook is the second most powerful piece. It can move up, down, and to the side as far as it wants. But the rook can only move in straight lines. Rook also can't jump over any other piece. Let's take a look at some rook moves. In this position, the rook could move straight up, it could slide to the corner, it could move all the way down the board. Now it could swing to the other side, or it could make some shorter move like here and here. Now that you have learned how the rook moves, the king might be the most important piece in chess, but the queen is by far the most powerful. Like the king, the queen can move in any direction, forward, backward, to the side, as well as diagonally. Unlike the king, the queen can move as far as she wants in any direction. The one thing the queen can't do is jump over other pieces like knights. Let's look at some queen moves. In this position, the queen can go all the way up the diagonal. She could slide all the way across the board. She could now move all the way down here, and she could make some shorter moves like here, here, and here another queen move. Earlier, we mentioned that the queen can't jump over other pieces. In this position, let's say the queen wants to get this square. Notice that the king is currently in the way of the queen. So the queen would have to move to another square first, and only then on the next turn, the queen can move here. You have already learned how to move the pieces, and we have mentioned the idea of capturing. Let's talk more about capturing. In chess, when you capture a piece, you simply move your own piece to the same square as your opponent's piece and replace their pieces with your own. The captured piece is then removed from the board. You don't stop before the captured piece. You replaced it entirely. Let's watch this queen capture a pawn. Now let's watch this knight jump over one of its own piece to capture the queen. Capturing pieces is a critical part of the game. However, you do not have to capture a piece if you don't want to. That being said, if you can capture more of your opponent's pieces than the capture of yours, it is going to be much easier to win. Now we have learned how to move pieces and how to capture them. Now we are going to learn some special rules in chess. Remember, your pawns are the only piece that cannot move backward. So what happens when they reach the other side of the board? You get promotion. When a pawn reaches the back end, it transforms into any piece you choose. It can turn into a knight, a bishop, a rook, or the powerful queen. It cannot stay a pawn and it cannot become a king. Every pawn has the potential to become a queen, and you could have multiple queens on the board at the same time. While the queen is the most common choice, there are some rare situations where you might choose a knight to deliver an immediate check. or a rook to avoid stalemate. One important rule to remember is that the promotion happens the very instant the pawn touches the back rank. The pawn changes immediately before your turns end. The last weird rule in chess is called in passant, which is French for in passing. This rule was introduced at the same time that pawns were allowed to move forward two squares on their first move. When that happened, sometimes pawns could move past other pawns without giving the other pawns an opportunity to capture, which didn't seem fair, so en passant was invented. Pay attention, it is tricky. If your opponent's pawn moves forward two squares, which it can only do if it is that pawn's first move, and it lands directly next to one of your pawns. And on your next turn, and that turn only, you have the opportunity to capture that pawn, as if it had only moved one square. Like this, let's take a look at that again. If a pawn is moved forward two square and land next to another pawn, that pawn can capture the next pawn on its very next move. You move behind the pawn, as if it had moved only one square and capture it placing it off the board. You might get some weird look if you do this move in a game with someone who doesn't know, but it is an important rule of chess. Now you have learned about pawn promotion and en passant. Let's jump on to the next special rule, castling. One of the most useful rules of the chess is called castling. This move was invented to speed up the game and do two things at once. When you castle, your king moves toward the safety of the corner and your rook comes toward the action in the middle. You literally are moving two pieces at once, but it counts as just one move. You can castle in either direction, left or right. In both cases, your king moves over only two squares and then the rook from this side is moved directly to the other side of the king, like this. And here is another example of castling. Castling is a great move with many benefits if it is used at the right time. However, there are few conditions that may prevent you from castling. First off, you cannot castle when you are in check. You must deal first with the check before trying to castle. Secondly, you cannot castle if your king would castle through a check or if after castle, your king would land into a check. Next, you cannot castle if there are any pieces between your king and your rook. It must be completely empty. In this position, both white and black have to move one piece before they are able to castle. After knight f3 and bishop c5, for example, both sides are now able to castle king side. Finally, you cannot castle if your king has made any other move before or if the rook you are castling with has already moved. It must be the first move of the both pieces. In this position, the only legal castling move is for black. Since white's king has already moved, white cannot castle. Black can only castle with the rook on h8 because the other rook has already moved. When we learned about the castling, let's talk about check. Check is the word that is used when a piece is threatening to capture the other side's king. Check basically means look out, king is in danger. Let's take a look at some examples of playing check. In this position, can you see how white can threaten to capture the black king? That's right, bishop to f6 check. White's bishop put the black king in danger of capture, so black must deal with this check. In the next lesson, we will learn about the three ways of getting out of check. In this position, black's rook can put white's king into danger. After rook d1, the white king is in check and white must respond to this attack. Finally, in this position, black's pawn is ready to capture the white knight. Remember, pawns capture one square away diagonally. Can you see how white can escape the pawn's attack and place the black king into check? If you found knight to g6, great job. The knight escapes the danger and now puts the black king into check. Now you learn how to give check. Now it is the time to learn how to escape from a check. As we learned in the last lesson, when the king is in check, it must get out of check. You cannot ignore check and do another move you want to do while leaving your king in check. You have to stop the check. Luckily, you have three easy ways to get out of check. The simplest way to get out of check is to move your king to a square where it is no longer in check, like this. Another way to get out of check is to block the check with another one of your piece. Oftentimes, the best way to get out of check is to capture the checking piece. If a king is in check and it cannot escape by moving, blocking, capturing, then the king is said to be in checkmate. That means you win or maybe your opponent won. Checkmate is the entire goal of chess. It doesn't matter who has captured the most pieces or how long it has taken or anything else. If the king is in checkmate, it is game over. Once the king is in checkmate, you don't have to take the king off the board. It is time to shake hands and say, good game. Chess can often be a long game with more than 100 moves played, but it can also be incredibly short if you want it to be. Let me show you the fastest checkmate possible. White plays f3, not a great opening, already exposing the king on the e1 and h4 diagonal. Black opens with the e5. Notice the black queen is already looking at the weakened h4 square. White plays g4, further weakening the e1 to h4 diagonal. And the black queen pounces on the h4 square, delivering the fastest checkmate in chess. Notice that the white king cannot move, there is no way to block the check, and you cannot capture the checking piece. So after two moves, the game is already over. There is another kind of mate on the board called stalemate. Stalemate is what happens when your king is not in check, but you also have no other legal moves on the board. And when this happens, it is a draw. Nobody wins. You might be absolutely winning your game and about to checkmate the opponent's king, but if you fall into the stalemate, it is a draw. Let's see some examples. In this position with white to move, the game would be a stalemate because white's only piece, the king, does not have any legal square to move, and white is not in check. In this position, let's say white plays queen to c2. The queen gets one square closer to the king, but notice black king is not in check and black does not have any legal position to go. In this position, the result will be stalemate. Remember, in chess, you are never forced to make an illegal move. So black cannot put the king onto a square where it would be captured. In this position, can you find a better move for white? White can actually win the game in just one move after pawn b2 checkmate. Remember, your opponent can never be in stalemate if they are in check. Stalemate is just one of the possible ways to end the game in a tie. Another way is simply agree to a draw, and the other can accept or decline. Another way to get a draw is if the exact same position is repeated 3 times. After 3 repetitions, either player can claim a draw when it is their turn to move. Or if you are playing online, a draw will automatically be called after 3 repetitions. Another way to draw is if neither player has enough pieces to checkmate. The king versus king, you will learn more about this later. Finally, you can also draw if 50 pairs of moves have been played on the board without any captures or a pawn move. Now that you have learned how to move, how to capture, check and checkmate, as well as do the special moves in chess like castling and passant, it is time for you to feel what it is like in a real game. In a real game, nobody is there to tell you what to move. You have to think and decide what the right move is. Should I move a piece or can I capture something? Should I castle or try to promote one of my pawns? There is where the thinking part of chess comes, and you have to try and decide what is your best move is. It takes time and practice to find the best move. Now it is your turn to continue practicing finding the best moves and the checkmates. Now you know how the pieces move, but do you know the mistakes beginners make in their first 5 moves? Subscribe so you don't miss the next lesson where I show you how to avoid it.